It's interesting as Sandy talks about how we've tried to unify our efforts. When I ran in 2013, the big factor for me was what was going on. The mayor was fighting with the unions. The mayor was fighting with the governor. The mayor was fighting with our own Detroit legislators. And the whole thing crystallized for me one night when I was watching one of my favorite TV shows, Stephen Colbert, and a familiar face was the guest. It was Stephen Henderson from the Free Press. And Stephen Henderson goes on, and he hands Colbert a sweatshirt that says, "Detroit versus everybody." And it really capsulized the feeling and what was going on. And so I came here from the beginning with a very conscious thought to say, we're going to change the politics of this city away from us versus them and toward collaboration. We're not going to attack people. We're not going to criticize people. We're going to pull people together. People said, yeah, that'll never work. But we gave it a try. And our first test came when the U.S. Navy Department and the University of Michigan and Ohio State were citing the Lightweight Metal Manufacturing Institute, a $150 million facility that is taking the latest research out of U of M and Ohio State, leading the country in making metals far lighter to put into ships and planes and cars. And they were going to have one location where all manufacturers could come and get the latest research and figure out how to put it actually to work. And shortly before I got here, a group had been selected, and they had a location out in the western suburbs. And I'd spent some time talking to the folks at Michigan and the like, said, if anything happens, let me know. Well, an interesting thing happened. Their lease at their suburban location fell apart, at which point the folks at U of M, Mark Bernstein and Andrea Fisher-Newman and the group said, if we're going to reopen this, we're going to put Detroit in the mix. And that's all I wanted, was a fair chance to compete. But this is what collaboration does for you. We found a location on a vacant factory over on Rosa Parks that was large enough. We put together an outstanding presentation on why it could be used. The University of Michigan folks came down and were supportive. I couldn't figure out how to reach Ohio State. I didn't want to tell them where I went to school. But as it turns out, Roy Wilson, the new president of Wayne State, is best friends and longtime, almost family member of the new president of Ohio State. And so Roy Wilson comes and gets engaged in the process. You've got to look at this. And so then Dave Egner and the folks from the New Economy Initiative step in. And they see what the imbalance in the dollars are. And the philanthropic community, many of in this room are supporting the NEI, put in $1 million to even it out. And their last question became security. Directly across the street is Dan Gilbert's new technology center with more cameras than you could possibly imagine. And so Dan Gilbert and his team came over and said, we'll include you in our security system. No media publicity, no nothing, until the announcement shocked everybody that the $150 million investment is going right down the street here on Rosa Parks. We broke ground last month, and the latest technology for manufacturing is going to be done here in Detroit with young people trained at Focus Hope. We're going to be the center for the next generation. It's a different kind of politics. One of the things that drives me nuts is the amount of manufacturing that is being done in Mexico, particularly in auto parts. And so with the help of a lot of people here, we've sat down with the auto companies and with the suppliers and said, I don't want any charity. Let's figure out how much it costs you to build these parts in Mexico and ship them up here versus what it costs here. And let's chip away at as many different things as we can so it's competitive for you to move them. And a lot of people are working on this. The UAW is involved as far as the wages. Some of our builders are involved as far as getting some factories built. But one of the biggest things had to be the tax issue. And this state had legislation that had created essentially 6 Renaissance zones in the state of Michigan that were tax-free zones for 12 years for new manufacturing, but Detroit wasn't included. And so I wanted to get a new bill, to have a 7th zone and put it in the city of Detroit. And we got sponsors, interestingly enough. A Republican senator from Escanaba, Michigan, Tom Casperson, and a Democratic rep from Marquette, Michigan, Jim Kivala. They co-sponsored the bill. We got it through the House. It was over to the Senate. We were about 3 days before Christmas. We were going to lose this in lame duck, and the legislature was all consumed with this discussion of the road funding and the like. I'm trying to get this bill through. A Senate leader by the name of Arlen Meekoff from outstate says, I'll get you a committee hearing and a vote, but it's up to you to get the votes. I go to the Senate hearing the very last day of their meeting, and Representative Kivala from Marquette comes over and he testifies with me in front of the Senate. And the first senator says, I don't get this. Why are 2 legislators from the Upper Peninsula sponsoring a Detroit bill? And Representative Kivala says, a Detroit bill? He says, there are 1,200 men and women in my district working in the mining industry, bringing the iron ore out that goes into the parts of these cars. If those parts are built in Mexico, the men and women in my district are out of work. If they're built in Detroit, we're going to be hiring. This isn't a Detroit bill, it's a Michigan. We're one Michigan. And the bill ended up passing overwhelmingly right before they broke. And we are now in conversations with a number of people to take a stretch of the city of Detroit on the east side near 94 and City Airport that hasn't seen development in decades and bring manufacturing jobs back. We did it without controversy. We did it without publicity. We did it with bipartisan cooperation. But we still have a ways to go in changing the politics and changing the conversation. And I was struck with it reading the Free Press this morning. And it was a good reminder to me how far we've come. But there's a story, the city of Pontiac is demolishing houses, and they announced a celebration yesterday that they knocked down 300 houses in 2014. And I was happy to see that, except they didn't just celebrate, they knocked out 300, they said, and Detroit's doing lousy and we're doing well. And I think, what do you mean? You knocked down 300 houses last year, which is 6 a week. We're taking down 100 to 200 houses a week. 300 houses went down last year in Pontiac. We had 1 week in August where we took 300 down in a single week. In October, the Treasury Department had a national conference in Washington, D.C. for all of the demolition programs in America. I was the featured speaker because Detroit is taking down houses at a rate that's never been seen in the country, and I was a speaker showing other people how to do it. Last week, we got a National Environmental Award for being the environmentally safest demolition process in the country. Not only are we taking down houses at a rate that haven't been seen, we're doing it in an environmentally sensitive way. We haven't criticized anybody on it. And I look at this and I say, I'm glad my friends in Pontiac have figured out how to knock down 6 houses a week. They ought to celebrate that. But can't we evolve to the point where you can celebrate your own success without shooting at somebody else? And then on Tuesday, I saw another reminder of how far we have to go. I was presenting the budget to the Detroit City Council, and we're talking about revenue challenges, expense challenges. Went reasonably well, and then one of the council members said, you know what? The residents of this city are getting it stuck to them. The homeowners are paying way too much. Businesses aren't paying enough. Don't you think we need to raise the taxes on the business? Let's raise the corporate income tax. And my nature is I didn't respond. And they said second time, well, do you have an opinion on that? And I said, I do have an opinion. I think us versus them politics has no place in this city. When you frame the question of homeowners versus business, it is the wrong question and it's the wrong conversation for us to have. The truth is that businesses in this town have a more expense to operate between insurance and taxes than they do in Ferndale. Homeowners in this town find it more expensive to live here because of car insurance and taxes than they do in Ferndale. We need to work on making it more competitive for everybody. We're not going to have this conversation about homeowners versus business. And to his credit, the council member immediately backed off. But here's the interesting thing. The rest of the council went to the next subject. 3 years ago, you'd have seen 6 council members piling on about how we should tax the businesses. The conversation is changing. But it's not just on the side that attacks businesses. There isn't too much more disturbing than some of the conversation we've seen in the appointment of the new councilwoman, Janae Ayers. Janae Ayers was a vice president of the Unite Union. In fact, they're the workers who work in this building. They did not support me in the course of the campaign. They supported my opponent. It's not like I have strong ties to them, but I am watching her be criticized as she's a labor candidate, Detroit's going backwards, and that's the way she's getting labeled. Let me tell you about Janae Ayers. She graduated from Renaissance High School. She got her undergraduate degree at Bowling State in public administration. She's got a college degree in how to run government. She had offers around the country and could have gone to Chicago. She says, I want to be part of Detroit. She is one of these talented young people who came back home, went to work in the recreation department. God help her, she's working in the city of Detroit. She gets laid off. She goes to work at Quicket Loans to sell mortgages, decides being on the telephone all day selling mortgages isn't for her, and goes to work at teaching in an alternative high school for kids who have dropped out or been expelled. And she goes into this high school of troubled kids, and she immediately starts not just teaching them during the week, but organizing weekend trips to college campuses. Because most of these kids had no idea what a college was. And she started getting them comfortable. This is how the dorm works. Here's the application process. She became a mentor to these young people to get them on the right track. And when the economic collapse came and the high school ended up getting cut, she said, I'm not going on unemployment, and I'm not leaving this town. She says, I'll do whatever I got to do to support myself. So she went in and she applied for a job at a casino to earn a living because she wanted to stay here. The union here, which was so non-functional, saw her talent, and almost immediately she got elected a union officer, rose the ranks, became the youngest vice president of the AFL-CIO. This is the kind of young person that we need to keep in this city. Whether she'll turn out to be a good council member or a bad council member, time will tell. But the one thing I know for sure is the conversation about somebody who has had that kind of achievement and commitment in life ought not to be dismissed as a bad choice because she came out of labor, okay? We need to change the conversation. If there's one thing that we can all collaborate on, and I hope you will help with us on this, and that is we ought to all agree that we have got to create opportunities for our young people. We got these kids at 14, 15, 16 years old in Detroit, and they think there is no path for them economically. And I know for me, one of the most powerful forces in my life was in high school, my first summer job, which was on the back of a garbage truck in the city of Southfield, which is a suburb I'll never forget, and it kept me motivated all through law school not to drop out. But it taught you what it meant to get up in the morning when you don't want to get the work done, how you cash a paycheck, how you open a bank account. This summer, we want to create 5,000 jobs so that our high school students can get that opportunity. They can learn what it means to dress at work, how do you behave at work, get your first paycheck, see what you like and what you don't like. At the DMC, we hired 100 kids every summer from the first year I was there in 2004. We paid them $10 an hour, and at the end of the summer, we had a graduation. And it was amazing the change in a 6 or 7 week period. 10 years later, we have kids who went through that program as high school students who are doctors today. We got kids who are scientists in biology departments across the country. We got kids who never went to college but are now running an MRI or a CT machine. Summer jobs change people's lives and they show them there's opportunities. So you have on your table a way that you can help. 6-week program. The kids are paid $2,000 for the summer. If you can take one kid or more, that'd be great. Fill out the form and give a kid an opportunity. If you can't afford to pay $2,000 in your business, we'll pay half. Sign up. It'll only cost you $1,000. But if we can create 5,000 opportunities for our young people this summer, it will change the tone in this community, and it'll be a significant step forward. The Chamber has been enormously supportive of this on this effort. I can't thank Sandy enough for what he's done. And before you leave today, Alexis Wiley will be standing at the door. She's bigger than most of you, and she probably won't let you out without giving her a card. So please fill out the form. We'd love to have your help. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, let's start with this idea of collaboration, which you were just talking about. There are a lot of people in Detroit, in the city, who are concerned about how collaboration and cooperation will help them, residents of the city, businesses that have been in the city for a long time. What's your take on why they should be hopeful about what's going on?
Well, you look at what is occurring, and we get up every day in the administration thinking, it's exciting to see all the things that are happening. How do we make sure longtime Detroiters are included? And so I spent a lot of time talking about it in my State of the City speech, but there's been an enormous reaction to the 0% loan program to fix up homes in the neighborhoods. People who paid their taxes, stayed in their houses, now they see the property values going up, and they want to be able to fix up their house and hang in there. And we've got a program now with a combination of philanthropy and federal money to do that. And we are also making commitments on things like the Illiches have been phenomenal. 51% of all the workers working on the hockey arena development in this area will be residents of the city of Detroit. So now we're backing up and working with the skilled trades to make sure we're opening up apprenticeships to Detroiters so that when the Illich organization goes to hire them, we in fact have qualified Detroiters, and the trades are cooperating. So the number of barriers that we have to break down, if you look at them all, it's kind of overwhelming. But when you chip away one at a time, I think people can feel a difference.
You mentioned the Illich hockey arena project and the fact that they've agreed to hire 51% of the employees as Detroiters, but of course they're not bound by that because there was no community benefits agreement in that deal. You've been in the center of a debate on City Council about whether we ought to have an ordinance that says, look, nothing gets done really of significance around here without that community benefits agreement. Where are we with that?
Well, there's a difference between an ordinance and agreement. We do have an agreement with them on the 51%.
Right.
And so this community benefits ordinance is a good example of the kind of conversation that we have to have. I've been opposed to the first version of the ordinance because the first version of the ordinance had a provision that said if a major employer wants to come to town, they have to contact the citizens within a census tract. Those citizens elect a group of people somehow to negotiate with them before they ever come to us. Well, we wouldn't land any businesses if we did that, and I oppose that. But the interesting thing is when we explained it to City Council, it never got out of committee. That version of the ordinance never got 2 votes to get out of committee. On the other hand, there's a legitimate issue here. For example, Marathon Oil was given a $175 million tax break on the promise they'd hire Detroiters and give scholarships. Well, today, out of 500 employees, only 30 are from the city of Detroit. That was a case where the city did not get an agreement. And council, you can understand, says we gave them $175 million and less than 10% are here. And so the question is, what's the balance? And we're working very hard at that. I think we're going to end up with a fair program by which we will, at the city, initiate conversations with major employers and neighborhood groups and have some parameters on what's expected that I think will be very positive. But if there's one thing that could be helpful, my friends here at the Chamber are supporting a bill in Lansing that basically says local governments can't address community benefits. And one of the problems with the idea of collaboration is when the collaboration doesn't start to go your way, you can't go up to Lansing and say, collaboration's over. It's creating an amount of tension. And so I hope my friends here will back off on that, engage with us at the city level, because I do think we're going to reach a resolution that everybody's going to be good with. But the notion of home rule is so emotionally core to Detroiters that when you start saying we're going to take it away from you, now you're moving in a really bad direction.
So do you think the solution ultimately involves an ordinance or no ordinance?
Whether it's an ordinance or a policy is something we have to work out, but I think in the next month or two we're going to get to a final resolution at the city level that will allow any business to come in to know exactly what's expected in the process, exactly what the parameters of the local support are, and will give them a defined process which that's what a business person wants. They want to know, is the process certain, timely, and can I understand the parameters? And that's what we want, and I think it's going to work out.
Right. You've turned the focus in recent months to the neighborhoods, really looking at, okay, what are we going to do with all the abandoned structures? How are we going to rebuild and repopulate neighborhoods that have emptied out? Money obviously drives all of that, and there isn't a lot of it. Even with the bankruptcy, your budget is still pretty tight. Federal money is there for demolition, but that goes pretty quickly. What kind of investment do we need to see still in city government in Detroit, and where does that come from in order to do the things you want to do?
Well, if you look at what's happened in the bankruptcy, by shedding the debt, basically the city of Detroit's problem was for years it took in $1 billion a year in revenue and it spent $1 billion too. And it kept doing that until it maxed out the city's legal ability to borrow, which is what triggered the bankruptcy. With the debt that's been shed, we're taking in $1 billion a year in revenue, and we got baseline of expenses about $950 million. Not a lot of cushion, but we've got enough for 200 more police officers, 100 more firefighters. We can operate. What we don't have is $500 million in investment it's going to take out the abandoned houses. And so the federal government, with some support from the Snyder administration, allocated us $100 million from the TARP funds. We knocked down 4,000 houses last year. We'll take another 4,000 down through this August. Right now, I don't know where that money comes from after August. But, a few weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C. with Debbie Stabenow and Gary Peters and the Treasury Secretary, Jack Lew. We have a new strategy on a new source of funds. The Obama administration has been enormously supportive. But sometime in the next 3 or 4 months, we're going to have to figure that out because the pipeline of these demolitions is otherwise going to run dry. So I'm grinding away at it every day. Don't know what the answer is yet, but I'm optimistic we'll find one.
What about Lansing? What do you need, what do all cities need in terms of investment from state government?
I don't need money from Lansing. This year, what I need from Lansing is 2 things. The income tax collections for people who live in the city and work in the suburbs are not being done. That is, suburban companies are not withholding their city income tax. If somebody lives in Detroit and works in Farmington, the Farmington company is withholding the federal tax, the state tax, and it's not withholding the local tax. Your ability to collect taxes when it's not withheld goes from like 100% to 20%. And there are 22 cities in the state with an income tax. One of the things, and the governor is supportive on this, we're going to try to push, is a provision that requires companies in the suburbs to deduct their city taxes like they do the state and federal taxes. That would have an enormous effect, just helping us collect the money we're owed, nothing new. And the other, of course, is car insurance. And it costs $1,800 a year on average to insure a car in the suburbs, and it costs $3,600 on average to insure a car in the city of Detroit. So Detroiters can't afford to pay $300 a month in car insurance. For most cases, it's more than their car note. And so I've been spending a lot of time already with the Republican leadership on some ideas on that. But the 2 things I'm going to try to get done in Lansing is I'm not going to ask for another dollar. I just want our income taxes collected and the ability to be competitive on car insurance.
What about from businesses? I mean, we've seen, at least in my lifetime, an unprecedented level of private investment in the city's core, principally downtown, somewhat in Midtown. But a lot of that's driven by one person and one company, although there are some others participating. What do you need from the businesses that are still sitting on the sidelines, waiting to see how things are going to go in Detroit?
Well, I think you're going to see some more announcements and some more good news, but certainly it's not just one company. Dan Gilbert has been enormously helpful. On the other hand, the Ilitch organization has been enormously helpful. Jerry Anderson doesn't take a lot of credit, but DTE in this area has done a great job on rebuilding. And of course, before downtown came back, Midtown came back, and it didn't come back with the Ilitches and the Gilberts. Sure. It came back with Sue Mosey, business by business, with the help of DMC, Henry Ford, and Wayne State. So you got lots of different people doing things, and we now have, there isn't a day goes by that I don't get a national company in here saying this next generation of young people does not want to live in the suburbs and drive a minivan and be in a suburban office park. That's just reality. More and more they want to be in a tightly interconnected area, and so we are seeing the companies who need the brightest young talent coming out of college looking at this environment. And so my job is make sure the police show up, the fires show up, the garbage gets picked up, the lights are on, create the environment to take advantage of a national trend that's happening on its own.
Yeah. We are also seeing some movement finally in terms of rethinking the governance and management of Detroit public schools, as well as charter schools and the EAA schools. I know that you're heavily involved in those talks and those negotiations. We're, I guess, a month away from seeing the curtain raised on what you guys have come up with. Give me some idea of where that's headed, though, and what role you see for yourself in that future.
Well, for sure, I'm not going to run the Detroit public schools. I mean, if you were to sit in my office and see what we got to do just to fix the computer system, which has a 10-year-old operating system and probably can't open the attachment you sent me, we got a lot of basics that we got to fix. And so I just don't have the management capacity to run the Detroit public schools today. On the other hand, there could be a central authorizing role where today there are 20 different entities that can charter a school. We got neighborhoods where schools are being opened far more than we need. We got other neighborhoods where we need schools, we don't have them. I think there could be a central authorizing role. But this process, you want to talk about collaboration. I've been in these meetings, the discussions are very intense, but you have Mark Royce from GM and John Ricolter from Walbridge Aldinger sitting in the same room with Lamar Lemons and some of the most aggressive community activists. Wendell Anthony is always engaged in this room, having a debate on what's the right thing. And you would be amazed at how constructive the conversation is. It's all being led by Tanya Allen from the Skillman Foundation. So I'm not going to prejudge their process, but I can tell you from the meeting I was in for 2 or 3 hours one night last week, I'm enormously encouraged by the direction it's going. And hopefully this will be the best example of community business collaboration for a solution that will change the direction.
You mentioned the role of central authorizer. Is that a role that you're interested in?
You know, if it's done the right way, I've said this before, I'm willing to do it. Here's the thing that you look at. You go to some neighborhoods, there are no schools. You go to other neighborhoods, and there are many. I've talked to some of the top charter school operators in the country, and I say, why are you not in Michigan? They said, you'd be crazy to come to Michigan. With 20 authorizers, you start your quality school, you start to build. Another one can open 6 blocks down and take 20% of your kids, and all of a sudden you're financially underwater. We got a lot of states we can go to that are operating rationally. So what would happen if you had a board, a Detroit Education Commission, that said, if you want to open a new school in the city, you've got to indicate what kind of school and what location, and would be authorized by this. On the other hand, if we have a neighborhood like Brightmoor that doesn't have a school, the Education Commission would go say, we'll take proposals to put a K-5 school in this location. And my thing is, I don't care if you're a charter school, an EAA school, or a public school. All I care about is whether you're a quality school. And if you had an authorizing board that did nothing but maximize the seats in the quality schools, where would you be? If you want to, as a parent today in Detroit, get your kid into Chrysler Elementary School, a school down the street that I talked about in my State of the City, where the kids won the elementary school national chess championship, there's a huge wait list. But you could apply to Chrysler, you could apply to Cornerstone, you could apply to University Prep today. You're going through 3 different application processes, 3 different timelines. You don't know what's going to happen. Why can't we have a common enrollment process that you can fill out as a parent, one application for all these schools? And then my question is, we do not let charter schools select based on income or the like, but if the charter school doesn't offer bus service, you've effectively selected by income for the 40% of Detroiters who don't have a car. Shouldn't we have a single transportation system for the children in the city to get you to the public EAA and charter schools so now choice is available to every parent regardless of income? I see the authorizing entity becoming the entity that allows these things to happen, not the entity that tells the public school how to run, the charter school how to run, but creates the entity where those that are succeeding grow, those that aren't succeeding are allowed to go away.
And that transit piece, is that something that DDOT could do or
Yes.
oversee with private contractors?
I understand they've done it in Denver, but a combination of DDOT and the school buses, a huge number of children ride DDOT buses to school today. And I'm confident in the first half of this year, DDOT's going to run on schedule, which will be even better. But if you put the two together, I think you're far more efficient than the disconnected network we have today.
Okay. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.